How's it going with you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Jen?
I'm okay. Yeah, it's spring finally, so I'm really glad. And I know I have this preference for warmer weather. And I think that's something we were going to talk about today, right? Around preferences and aversions.
Yeah, this was a topic that I think we were chatting about last week, and I thought, oh, this is a great one to talk about. And I actually brought this in as one of my topics for my classes this week. And I thought, oh, since we're on topic, it'd be fun to, dive a little bit deeper into preferences because preferences is something that we have, right? Like we all of us, we have preferences towards something, and then and not having the same attraction to other things, and it's very natural. It's part of our human nature, just like you said, oh, I prefer the warmer weather and someone else might prefer the cooler weather. So there's not even a right or wrong to any of these preferences. It's really what you prefer. But one of the things that I talked about in class this week was that when we have preferences, obviously that means you like something over another. So you're more naturally drawn to things that you prefer, and you more naturally move away from things that you prefer less. And I know this seems common sense and all, but just in that, it can, and not always, but it can create an attachment to the things that you like or the things that you love, especially things you feel really strongly about. And then you can start pushing away things that are the opposite of that. And so that in itself, now you've created an attachment to certain things and aversion to other things. And, as you know, attachments and aversions in the spiritual teaching, it tells us these are the causes of suffering. And so, for those of us who are on a spiritual journey, some of us might wonder, well, is it bad to have attachments? Is it bad that to have aversions? And if I have preferences and if I have judgments and biases about things, then how will I ever get away from attachments and aversions? So that's what we were talking about. What about you, Jen? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting because it reminds me of these conversations I had with a friend. And when we were, those times of retreat and everybody was bubbling, it's when we were with the people, like our loved ones, even that we were noticing our various preferences because we were with them for 24 hours a day, practically. And it was funny. And in the readings, actually, I remember going through the Iris readings at that time. And it was like a relief when I realized that these were just preferences or aversions. I mean, it was just that. It was like you said, neither good or bad. But definitely, I had a preference of how I like things in the house. Just I like things a certain way. I wanted certain things, but it could have caused conflict had I not realized that it was a preference. And I think in the past, certain preferences did cause conflict because I thought I was right. Or even if I didn't think of that consciously, there was this feeling inside that maybe I was right or something, right? And that was the
Mhm.
same thing with my friend. We were realizing that it was important to notice that we just had these different lifestyle preferences with the people we're bubbling with and with 24 hours a day so that we could just choose. So it came down for me at least. I know there's an infinite of possibilities, but either, for example, choosing to put something away in the kitchen or get rid of something like a dirty spoon or tea bags or something, or leave them. And then which one was going to give me more joy? Like leaving it gave me joy, or putting them in the garbage or cleaning up gave me more joy. And I guess also for that other person, I think they didn't care. So it didn't matter with that whether I left the tea bags or the dirty spoons. It was just funny though, because like for a long time, I really had to intentionally think about it. Like I had to stop myself. Okay, how irritated am I? To the point where it finally came a time when we revisited this conversation, and I had realized that those things didn't bother me anymore. Like I didn't even notice them. I either just naturally put things away or naturally left them without having to like concentrate, like what brought me joy that day. Have you kind of gone through that with your loved ones?
Yeah, definitely. I'm someone who used to be very particular about how things are in my space. I'm a very clean person, and organized, and I like to have my space also reflected in the same way. So I would like even like put a pillow at a certain angle and fluff it in a certain way, and then that's the spot for it. And so just even little things when the kids would be home, and of course, they'll be jumping on the couch and playing, and then I'm like right afterwards, like trying to fluff everything and put everything back in place. It was like, yeah, it was, I just needed, I felt like I needed things a certain way. I preferred the space to be a certain way. And then of course I got irritated and frustrated when it got messed up, and that they wouldn't put it back in that way, right? And then and then after a while, it's when we went through our irest, integrative restoration training, that's when I started to notice a lot more about, okay, well, why am I feeling a certain way? Why, it's just a pillow. Why am I so upset about this? And, of course, we can dive deep into what's underneath layer by layer, but even just staying on topic about preferences, that helped a lot to realize that, you know, like you said, that there are many different ways that a room can be. I like a certain way. It's my preferred way, but it's not right or wrong. It's just what I would like. And yet there are other people that I'm living with in the same household that would prefer it in a different way, right? Because if they wanted it the same way, they would automatically put things back, but they actually preferred it to have pillows everywhere, right? And so when we start to realize that, oh, these are our preferences, is not the right way to do something, or even just to recognize, wow, how attached am I to this preference? Isn't that interesting? And I think that just that awareness alone gives us the ability to move back and think, oh, I don't need to be so attached, because it is this attachment that's causing me suffering, because now I'm frustrated every time it gets messed up. I'm chasing after everyone and I'm constantly rearranging, the furniture to my liking. It was a lot of work for me. And so when I realized that, oh, this was a preference and here's my attachment, how would it feel if I were not so attached? How would I feel if I were to take a step back? And I did eventually learn over time that it's okay. I don't need it to to have it in a certain way. If I if I wanted to, some days I go and rearrange something, and then yet there are days where things are just everywhere, and I'm like, well, that's okay. Like that's okay. And so, yeah, it really did help a lot in terms of how I feel. And there's more harmony and there's less stress in the house, because it's not just that I'm stressed, because as you can understand, when you're stressed at home, everyone else is also feeling your stress and your tension. So it really shifts the whole energy of the house. And so when I can take that step back, everything is just more easy going. And then even when I say, come on, guys, let's pick up, there's less resistance to it. They're like, yeah, okay. Right. So I think that, everything just feels like, oh, everybody can take a breath. It's all good. Yeah.
It reminds me of, you had just pointed out a bit, because there was one thing that connected to it initially, was this idea that they don't care about me or something, right? Because
Mm,
they're not doing it the way that I've been doing it, there's a deeper message that they don't care about me. And it was interesting when I realized that, like, and then I had to take time to go through, like we always go back to the iris training. Like with the iris training, I was able to go and hold space for these messengers and, like, okay, is this true? And what is this thought that's arising? And maybe it's just a passing thought, right? And like 99% of the time, it was just a passing thought. And maybe it does go back to maybe some feelings of childhood that we all talk about. Um, but then once I realized that like, the leftover spoon or the tea bag had nothing to do with my being enough or worthy of love or being lovable, it just made things easier too. Like it's so interesting how little things can maybe trigger or just remind us of something that's, still a little bit delicate that we need to leave space for. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I meant when we can go down layer by layer, because oftentimes it's not the actual situation that is the issue, even though we put so much focus and energy in saying, oh, say my kids, oh, they messed up the living room, and I get so upset. And but it, like you say, it's probably not even about that. It's probably about, oh, I told them I like it a certain way and they keep messing it up. Therefore, they don't respect me or they don't care about me, or I need to be more authoritative. Or, you might have all of these stories around um, what that action is about. But oftentimes it's not even about that. Kids are just being kids. They're just having fun. They love you, they respect you, but also, they weren't thinking about it in the moment. But I think as a parent, we might just go there and say, I've told you so many times and you still do this, so therefore you must not, respect me, or you must not whatever. And I think that that's well, I don't like to use the word mistake, because I think everything happens for a reason. But if we were to call it a mistake, that's something that I've done like quite a bit. Is I would put my story onto their actions and then interpret it in such a way that that was not even the case. Like they weren't even doing that. They had no awareness of that. They were just in their own little worlds. And then I'll take that action and say, oh, this means that. And then it feeds whatever insecurities that I had about myself. And so, yeah, I think that it's really important that we do create that space for us to reflect from a non-judgmental, from the place of a non-judgmental witness. Um, and start to understand, okay, where are my preferences? What am I working with? Am I triggered here? Why am I really upset about this? Yeah.
You actually brought up something else for me that I've lost. But yeah, like it's interesting how these preferences really can cause such suffering when it's really just a preference. And I think it's really important, this awareness that we have these aversions and these preferences. Um, yeah, so it just creates more harmonioususness, right? When we realize it isn't personal, right?
And also to remember that your preferences are just that. They're your preferences. And sometimes we get into this mind frame that, oh, it's my preference. And therefore everyone knows it's my preference, or it's a known fact. Right. And then so when someone else does something different, we can feel really like righteous about it. It's like, I cannot believe that he never puts the dishes in the dishwasher. How blah, 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 blah. Like, it's our story, right? And so that's really interesting for us to maybe also examine that a little bit, right? That it's your preference, and we are all gonna have our own preferences. And why do you think yours is the right one, or the one that needs to be followed, right?
It's
Yeah.
interesting. So what I was thinking of at that time was related to norms and habitual patterns. So I think we start to feel like something we've just done over and over again, whether, it's not right or wrong or anything, but we've just done it so many times, it starts to feel as though it's a preference and it's right. Whether like really it's just something we've just been doing over and over, and maybe it could use a tweak or something, or just analysis of it and looking at it again, because people are doing it a different way. They have different preferences. But it's interesting how these habitual patterns and these norms start to be equated with what's right, really in society as well, right? There's so many things that society has done become a norm, and people believe that it therefore the best way or it's right, when really it's just been done just by a lot of people. Doesn't mean that it's better.
Yeah, and I guess, this forms our way of viewing the world, our conditioned habits and beliefs. And so if your family or the people around you all did the same thing, or that did it a certain way, then it may not even be your preference. It might just be that you you have not known another way to do or think when it comes to certain things. And then so when you do now come across someone who's different from you, you might feel like, oh, that person is the odd one out because everyone I know in my life have always done this, right? And so just being, again, it's that self-inquiry. That's what's going to help us to stay open, right? To stay open-minded and stay open-hearted, to remind ourselves that our experiences, our thoughts, and all of the things that we experience is just one very small aspect of the totality of life. And so when we understand that, or invite that way of thinking into ourselves a little bit more, then now we're more open to other differences and other people with curiosity. So instead of coming in and say, oh, you're different, you're wrong, we're like, oh, you're different. Tell me more. This is so interesting. Right?
I agree. So it sounds like maybe a tip can evolve from that. Do you have a tip for people that they might use with this whole topic of preference and aversions, perhaps?
Yeah. So I think that embrace well, I don't want to say embrace your attachments. What I really wanted to say is that embrace that you're human, and that even though attachments and aversions can cause us suffering, it doesn't mean that, oh, these are bad and I need to get away from them, because in that's an aversion in itself, right? So what we're trying to say from the irest perspective is, what can we welcome more of in our lives? How can we come to a place where we're not we're getting, so we can notice our preferences, like I said, and we can notice our judgments and all of these things and our fears, and because we're not going to get rid of them as long as we live in this human form, we're going to have them. So it's okay that we have them. But what if we were more mindful about what's coming in and out of our internal landscape? What if we can be conscious and aware when, oh, a preference is present. I have a preference for something in this moment. Have that preference, but also know that you're having that preference. And then, and also when you do feel, really drawn to something or attached to something, you say, oh, I really need it. Be aware that you are really needing it. And then in that awareness, that gives you maybe just enough space to ask yourself the question, but why? Right? But if not, that's okay too. Just be aware. If there's one thing that you need to, well, you don't need to do anything, but if there's one thing you want to do, it's just to be mindful and aware. And that will apply for aversions, fears, insecurities, all the things that you're trying to move away from. Be aware that you're doing that. And if there's space for you to ask the question why, ask why. But as a first step, let's just be more aware everything that's going in, maybe even putting a name to it if that's helpful. So when you feel like, oh, I'm in this situation, I'm really uncomfortable. Okay, can I at least name what might be going on? Is there a fear, or is there an attachment to something, or are you not getting what you want? Is there a preference for something? Like, what's going on in this moment? Maybe we can name it. And that sometimes can help us to calm the nervous system a little bit. And that might give us enough space to ground and maybe do further investigation as to, okay, why am I feeling this? What's really going on? So I think my tip is, what can you do to just be more aware of everything that's everything that's going on within. And of course, it's not about everything, because I know a lot goes on, but can we start to just be more mindful in general as to, oh, the thoughts that are coming? Look at what I'm doing here. What is my action here? Yeah.
That sounds wonderful. I know that sounds, we could use that for, I think, moment to moment, especially for ourselves. And I was just thinking, as an extension to that, maybe building some compassion towards those around us who also have preferences, aversions, especially, children around us. And then maybe some of the seniors who are around us, because I know we're sort of in that sandwich state. But I remember reflecting as an educator that children, they actually have this natural sort of preference. Maybe it's more biological for play. So
Mm.
understanding sort of the biological background, or why a certain preference is there, not necessarily like saying that it's completely okay that they can destroy the living room, but understanding, like you said, like with a playfulness, they've played, and then you make it fun, like, okay, like let's see how much we can clean up in a minute, you know so doing that together, and maybe with seniors even, because especially for those who maybe haven't been practicing mindfulness, or just came from a different era perhaps, understanding where they come from, and that some of their preferences might be locked in after 80 years of doing the same thing, right? So, not that they can't learn anything new, but we know how difficult it can be for them. So, as we build a bit more compassion around their, really tight aversions and preferences, sometimes we can almost come to it with a playfulness, you know? So, I guess those would be my tips. Maybe just understanding sort of the biological reasons, and understanding those, the sandwich years, so the ones younger than us and those a little bit older who might have reasons for their playfulness or their aversions to things.
Yeah, that's super, super helpful, especially like you said, with kids where they don't have the capacity to think like us in the same way. That having that compassion and understanding is going to be very helpful. And also with seniors, like you said, that maybe there's less of the capacity for for that flexibility and change, or for various reasons. But I also think because everything is interconnected, in you learning about their needs and their stage of growth or stage of life, you start to understand that, oh, whatever beliefs you had about yourself that you think that they are feeding, perhaps is not that. And also that you, through your interaction with them, you also start to realize your own preferences as well. So you're always learning. So I think it's just such a beautiful, beautiful way to integrate both, right? That understanding of yourself and others, and how we can integrate and find a new way to relate to each other. So yeah, that's beautiful.
Well, hopefully, people will let us know how it goes for them, see how they inquire and are curious about their preferences and aversions that are arising, and maybe around the people who are closest to them as well. So, we'll
Yeah.
catch you next time, okay? Take
Thank
care.
you.
See you.
Bye now.